is this book?
I have no idea. It's a good question. It's worth 3 points.
Oh.
So that'd be 15% of your AR points that you need. So, all right, we're going to finish this book right now. I'm super excited. Make sure you take the AR quiz if you'd like. I don't see why you wouldn't want to. So, remember, all these kids were put on this boat for a different reason, right? All different reasons. Some were troublemakers, some were fighting. One was watching TV too much. Yeah, they're working hard, learning all about teamwork, all that good stuff. And then big storm hits. JJ decides to be a little dum-dum and tries to put out the sails, which knocks the captain into the water. Captain dies. Bye, Captain. The whole, basically the boat's ruined, but they're getting it back together. They're trying to fix it. But then Mr. Radford knows they're sinking, so what does he do? Takes off in the middle of the night. We hate him. He left them. So now it's just the 6 kids. And then what happened? They're trying to get the boat working. And then giant fire, okay? And then now they're in the water. And so far we have only found Ian, Luke, Will, and Charla. Liza and JJ are still totally missing. And remember, they can only fit 3 people on the raft thing at a time. So one of them has to hang out in the water while the other ones are on the raft. They're taking shifts, and it's just, not a good time. So
it says I have 21.6 points.
Is that your total amount of points? You know what? I'll check after this, okay?
Okay.
Well, right now, I'm telling you, last time I checked, Nolan, you did not have 21 points. You only had 19.
Well, this time when you check, I will have 21 points.
Okay. Well, good. Let's, chapter 17, Wednesday, July 19th, 30 hours. So it is just, it's like 12:30 in the morning, okay? Night was the worst. The darkness closed in like an endless canopy of absolute blackness. With no moon, Luke couldn't even see Charla a few inches away. Ian, what time is it? Came Will's voice from the void. It's 12:30, Luke said irritably. We just checked 2 minutes ago. I don't really care about the time. I just want to see the light. He was talking about the tiny light on Ian's watch. Every time I fell asleep, I dreamed that I've gone blind. I need to see something. Try looking at the stars, suggested Ian from the water beside the aircraft. I can't sleep on my back. Luke was growing impatient. You might have noticed this isn't the Hilton. Make do. As Will struggled to roll over, he kneed Charla in the thigh. Reacting in shock, she elbowed Luke in the ribs. As if he jackknifed in pain, the edge of the raft dipped, dunking Ian underwater. The tiniest move had a ripple effect through the whole group. It was that close and uncomfortable. Sputtering, Ian checked his watch. 12:33, he reported. Do it again. I missed it, said Will. Although the temperature never dropped below 70 degrees, the night felt almost bone-chilling after the burning heat of the day. Taking turns in shark bait position kept the castaways soaked to the skin, and the 6-hour shifts out of the water did little to dry them off. The seas had picked up, and even the smallest waves splashed over the cabin top. They had tried again to find an arrangement where all 4 of them could sit on the raft at the same time. But after repeatedly dunking and one real scare, the raft had almost bobbed away. They had decided that 3 riders and 1 shark bait was the only way to go. So they are really thinking things through, and they're agreeing upon things. So they are using teamwork, even though someone has to sit in the, the water, which sucks. Secretly, Luke didn't mind his shifts in the water, especially at night. While the air cooled down, the ocean stayed warm. It also provided protection from the wind. In fact, the only problem with shark bait position was exactly what the name implied. Sharks. Dangling there, you were a sitting duck for any sea creature that wanted to take a bite. They had seen fins cutting the surface around the raft, but Ian insisted they were dolphins. A shark fin is longer and more triangular with a small slot near the bottom. The kid was an endless fountain of information that nobody wanted to hear. Carcharodon carcadius, the great white shark, could destroy this raft in a single bite. A really great specimen can swallow a whole person. Let me guess, said Will. They did sharks on National Geographic Explorer. Don't knock it, mumbled Luke. Those guys make one heck of a watch. I'm not afraid of tiger sharks, Ian went on seriously. They're pack hunters, and they can go into what's called... I'm more afraid of tiger sharks. Ian went on seriously. They're pack hunters, and they can go into what's called a feeding frenzy. Enough, interrupted Charla, who was in shark bait position at the time. I don't want to hear another word about it until you're hanging down here on a worm hook. With the heat of the second day came thirst beyond anything they had experienced before in their lives. It was a familiar feeling at first, like the desire to hit the water fountain after the long, boring class on a steamy June afternoon. But then it transformed to something deeper and stronger. There was no water fountain. There never would be. Throats burned, lips cracked, and bled. Charla held the empty rubber hat. Did that show about shipwrecks mention what to do if it doesn't rain? She asked Ian. It'll rain, the boy promised. The other three noticed, though, that this was one statement with no backup research from television. There was hunger, too. They hadn't eaten for a whole 48 hours. The hunger mingled with the thirst to produce a never-ending dull ache that gripped each survivor from head to toe. It was a pain that radiated lack. Lack of water, lack of food, lack of sleep, lack of comfort. As the afternoon progressed, a few clouds appeared overhead. The castaways cheered them on as if the Super Bowl was being played out in the sky above them. A cool wind picked up, creating a chop on the top of the water. All right, rain, coaxed Will. Let's see what you've got. We should trap the water in the sail and drink it as it runs over the sides, Ian lectured. Get as much as you can while it's raining because that hat won't hold a lot. Luke had his hands out, palms up, waiting for the downpour. It didn't come. Or at least not to them. They could see it raining a quarter mile ahead of them, but they didn't get a single drop. There was genuine agony on the cabin top when the overcast thinned out and the sun broke through once again. No fair, Will moaned, addressing the clouds. Come back, come back. Where's the rain? That night, Luke hung over the side, drifting in and out of the uneasy world of half dreams. You never really sleep in shark bait position for fear of slipping off the raft and being lost forever. Suddenly, he heard a strange gurgling noise. It sounded like drinking? Will had edged his way forward and was now lying with his head over the side, swallowing greedily. Aghast, Luke grabbed him by the collar and pulled his face out of the water. Don't do that, Will. It's suicide. It was so dark that all Luke could see were Will's eyes. They seemed dazed, glossy, and feverish. It's water, man. Who cares if there's salt in it? Luke shook him angrily. That salt dehydrates you worse than going thirsty. You might have just cut a whole day off the time you can hold out. Maybe more. No, that's okay, Will insisted urgently. Listen, I figured out why we never found Liza and JJ. They've been rescued already. It doesn't make sense, Will, Luke argued. How could the rescue spot them and not us? JJ was right all along, Will explained. The captain and Radford are watching us. The others were in trouble, so they moved in and saved them. They haven't saved us yet because we're doing okay. So Mr. Will is officially like starting to go crazy. Sometimes, you know, when you're in dead sun and you're not getting the water that you need and you're not getting food and stuff, you can go a little bit crazy in your mind. So Luke is literally drinking salt water, which is super dangerous because the salt will only draw moisture out of your body more. So he's going to get even more thirsty. And he's saying, yeah, people are just watching us. They're just watching us, but we're doing fine. So no one's rescued us yet. Like, Will is losing it. Okay, Luke repeated. You call this okay? We're starving, dying of thirst. One of us has to hang in the water or we all drowned. Think, a shark could bite me in 2 this minute, and the rescue boat would get here in time to save 3.5 people. There is no bigger trouble than what we're in right now. If there's a rescuer out there, they'd be rescuing us. Will looked at him pitifully. Take it easy, Luke. Everything's under control. Don't panic. Luke stared back at him in growing horror. The kid was totally serious. There was only one explanation for this. Hunger, thirst, grief, and fear were causing Will Greenfield to lose his grip on reality. Remember, he also has lost his sister at this point, and we think she's dead. So he's also dealing with grief on top of hunger and thirst and being tired and all those things. How long would it be before the same thing happened to the rest of them? Chapter 18, Thursday, July 20th, 16:45 hour. When it finally rained, everybody was unprepared. Luke and Charla both pulled the sail canvas in opposite directions, spilling most of the water into the raft where it rolled off into the sea. Will had the shakes and dry heaves from drinking salt water. He tried to stand up and catch the drops in his cup hands, but succeeded only into tumbling off the cabin top headfirst into the ocean. By the time they managed to haul him back on board, the tropical cloudburst was over. The rain hat held about 1.5 inches of water. It was enough for 2 mouthfuls each. The water was warm and tasted a little salty. The rain hat, along with the raft and everything else on it, was crusted with sea salt, but it was fresh water, their first in 3 days. Every little bit helps, muttered Luke in disgust. What a joke. It's better to have nothing than just a thimbleful. This was just enough to remind us how much we need and what we're not getting, Charla agreed mournfully. Will's stomach was in bad shape that he couldn't even keep his share down. He took 1 gulp and spit over the side. The other 3 looked on in agony. To them, nothing was sadder than the thought of wasted water. So Will, since he drank that salt water, is still just sick. Like, he can do nothing about the fact that how sick he is. Boredom became as much of a problem as hunger and thirst. Minutes rolled into hours, which rolled into days with the dreary gray sameness. The overwhelming dullness canceled out every other emotion, even, at last, fear. It teamed up with the body's weakness to sink Luke into an almost sleepy fog. A couple of days before, his every thought was focused on being rescued. Now it seldom crossed his mind. He didn't expect to be rescued. Sometimes he was so numb that he couldn't have cared less whether he was rescued or not. There were moments when the Coast Guard could have rear-ended the cabin top and he probably wouldn't have even noticed. He could tell he wasn't the only one. By the next day, Will was virtually stopped talking. He lay on his side under the damp sail, his parched lips slightly apart, drifting in and out of a light doze. If anyone spoke to him, he only answered about half the time. More often than not, his replies made no sense at all. So Will is just getting sicker. He's getting hungrier, he's getting thirstier, and now he's not even making sense with what he's saying. When Ian informed Will that it was his turn for shark bait position, he was told, Liza came second in chess club, but she lost to Seth Burbaum in the final. By unspoken agreement, Luke, Ian, and Charla stopped asking Will to take his turn dangling in the ocean. One thing was obvious. If they spent much more time lost at sea, Will was not going to survive. From the start, Charla was stubbornly insistent on exercising, doing aquatics, and taking short swims during her shark bait time. But now she hung off the edge of the raft, gazing at the horizon with vacant eyes and never making any unnecessary move. Because every time you move, you're going to be burning calories. So she's like, okay, I got to keep what I have in my body. Can't move. Of the 4 of them, only Ian seemed to have energy to talk. He filled the endless hours with a monologue of every single detail he knew about the ocean. And he knew plenty. Hey, Ian, mumbled Luke listlessly. Don't you think it's time to close up the Encyclopedia Britannica and give us all a break? The boy flushed redder than the harsh sun and windbird. I talk too much, he said sadly. I'm boring. I was just kidding, Luke said, instantly sorry. If it wasn't for you and the Discovery Channel, we'd all be dead now. Talk all you'd like. I shouldn't, Ian conceded. When you talk, the moisture inside your mouth evaporates and you get dehydrated faster. Man, sighed Luke, I'd give anything for a Game Boy or at least a lousy deck of cards. I'd settle for a piece of string, Charla put in. I used to know how to do a cat's cradle. A lot of people don't know that blue whales are bigger than sperm whales, Ian took up his lecture. They said on TV once that a blue whale's tongue weighs as much as an elephant. Ian, Luke groaned. Seriously, the boy continued earnestly. Look at that one over there. It must be 30 yards long. Luke sat up in sudden surprise. What one over where? The whale, Ian insisted. He's spouting water 20 feet high. Luke stared. Before them, the Pacific Ocean stretched, blue-gray and unbroken, to the horizon. There was no whale. He exchanged a worried glance with Charla and turned back to the younger boy. In that show about shipwrecks, he said carefully. In that show about shipwrecks, he asked carefully, what were the warning signs? I mean, how do you know if you're going to make it or not? Slow, lazy behavior, Ian replied. Too much sleeping, followed by hallucinations, people seeing things that aren't really there. He pointed. Look! He's spouting again. So Will is basically not talking. He's basically asleep 24/7. He can't even move. And now Ian is seeing things that aren't really there, which he said are things about not going to survive, hallucinations. So that's a bad thing. We are on chapter 19, Sunday, July 23rd, 1320. That's 1:20 in the afternoon. Sun. Luke was aware of its harsh glare even through closed eyes. He could feel the pain of the sunburn on his face and arms. But no, this wasn't right. There was supposed to be protection, something white, a large sheet, a sail. Where was his corner? He spoke to the others. Cover me up. Here, I'm getting fried. Funny, why couldn't he hear his own voice? Come on, guys. This time he held his hand to his mouth. His lips weren't moving either. His brain was talking, but it didn't seem to be connected to his tongue. He had been in Shipwreck position for 2, 3, how many days now? He would have loved to stretch out and sleep. Hey, Charla, he turned to say, your turn. Was she ignoring him? No. His mouth was still not working. He couldn't expect people to read his mind, especially not unconscious people. They were, all three of them. Will had been first, even before their second rainstorm. They'd forced water down his throat, but it hadn't revived him. And anyways, Ian and Charla had gone down the very next day. Poor Ian, none of them deserved this. But the little kid was the most innocent of all of them, guilty of nothing more than watching too much TV. Now here he lay with a bird perched on his head. A bird? No, that couldn't be right. Luke's eyes were playing tricks on him again. There was no birds out here in the open ocean. They had to stay within flying range of land. He'd been having a lot of hallucinations, like a couple hours ago, days ago, when he'd had a very clear memory of Reese stashing the gun in his locker. Crazy. How could he remember what he hadn't seen? Of course he knew it had been Reese, even though that jerk denied it. So Luke's hazy mind had put together what must have happened and constructed a fake memory of it. It was not very different than Ian's wail, the beginning of the end. It was a terrible end, Luke decided, because your last thought is one that you realize you're losing your mind. What was this? His body wriggled with revelation as a long, slimy shape attacked and wrapped itself around his neck. He let go of the raft and tore at it, ripping it into pieces. An eel? A tentacle of a giant squid? Through the fog of his confusion, he struggled to focus on what was in his hand. Seaweed. Another hallucination. There was no seaweed in the open ocean either. Okay, so now 3 of them are unconscious. Charla, Ian, and Will. They're all just laying on the raft. They're all unconscious. So Luke has been stuck in the water because no one else can be in the water because they're not like awake. They're unconscious. So he's stuck in the water. Now he's seeing things. He thinks he sees a bird. He thinks that there's seaweed wrapped around him, but he's like, there's no seaweed in the open ocean. There's no birds in the open ocean. All this stuff. He thinks he's going crazy now too. Splashing wildly, he managed to regain his grip on the raft. He had no idea why he was struggling so hard to preserve his doomed life a few extra minutes. What was the point? They were all dead, courtesy of Ratface. Ratface, what a waste of a thought when there weren't many thoughts left. Luke forced the mate's picture out of his brain, but its replacement image was too painful. A felting glimpse of his parents, who would mourn him. He closed his eyes tightly, but they were still there. Make it stop, he tried to exclaim. And when he opened his eyes again, he saw the fin. Another hallucination? Maybe, but this one stuck him right in the ribs. Shark! He tried to sound the warning, but the technical difficulties between his brain and his mouth still existed. The raft bobbed away from the fin. Luke held his breath. The long shape of the water followed. Another bump. Luke braced himself for the ripping, tearing bite that would come next. But when he looked down, he saw the bottlenose snout of a dolphin. This time it nudged the raft, and Luke pulled along. He remembered somewhere in Ian's rambling lecture stories of dolphins pushing drowning survivors to safety. Surely this was the final hallucination, the last desperate brain impulse of a dying mind. He was amazed at how vivid he was. The white water roaring around him, the pounding of surf, the sudden thump of his dangling feet onto shallow, sandy bottom. Instinct took over. Instinct and a frantic desire to die on dry land. Luke pushed the raft with every ounce of his strength that remained in his exhausted body. Kept on pushing, even when the cabin top dug into the beach and would move no more. So they've officially made it to land. How the heck did they make it to land? I have no idea, but apparently they are on land. And apparently it's thanks to a dolphin. We don't really know. Chapter 20. This is the final chapter of the book. Sunday, July 23rd, 15:55. That is like 3-something in the afternoon, almost 4 o'clock. It was a drenching rain, a downpour. As Luke slept, he dreamed that hundreds of tiny jackhammers were working on his face. The water quickly puddled up in his eye sockets and in the hollows of both sides of his nose. The trickle found his lips. Water, real water, drinking water. He sat bolt upright and stared around him in confusion. Palm trees, jungle, a sandy beach. He leaped up too fast, toppling over and landing in the surf. As he lay there in the shallows, an amazing sight met his eyes. The cabin top was jammed into heavy sand just above the tide line. Will, Charla, and Ian lay upon it, still unconscious. Between Ian and Charla sat the rain hat, propped up by their bodies and full to overflowing with fresh water. Luke crawled through the surf, bent over the raft, and stuck his head into the hat, drinking greedily. Nothing had ever tasted better. He could have happily remained there, draining the hat dry. It took a gigantic effort to pull himself away. Carefully, like he was handling nitro, he picked up the hat and held it to Will's cracked lips. Luke watched the precious water roll down Will's chin. Finally, a tiny amount managed to find its way into his mouth. It dribbled down the back of his throat. He choked suddenly. Poor Will still couldn't keep anything down. He moved on to Charla. He propped her up on the sand and began wetting her lips with the water from his fingers. The girl opened her eyes and her mouth at the same time. Where? Drink, Will interrupted, and she did, gulping so deeply that she ended up choking too, although not a drop was wasted. The two attended to Ian. The younger boy smacked his lips at the first taste. Then he swallowed and kept on swallowing. He sat up, grabbed the hat, and chug-a-lug-lugged. In the spot where he'd been lying, the raft still said nix. Save some for Will, ordered Luke. Charla looked so worried, still disoriented. I don't know, she said nervously. Will's really messed up. He hasn't moved in days. Luke spilled water on Will's unturned face and forced some past his parched lips. The boy choked again, but this time the water stayed down. Luke dropped on his knees, gently slapped Will's cheeks. Come on, Will, join the party. No response. All three hunkered down and tried everything they could do to rouse their friend. No amount of shaking, pinching, chafing, massaging had any effect. He's definitely alive, concluded Ian, but there's no telling when he'll snap out of it. It could be 5 minutes from now. It could be never. He flushed at Luke's angry look and explained, I saw it on the Learning Channel. Charla looked around. What is this place? Who cares? Luke replied. It isn't the raft, it's land. That's all that matters. It must be an island, mused Ian. There's no way we could have drifted far enough to reach continental land. This is a miracle. To hit an island in this part of the Pacific is as unlikely as two bullets sticking together head on. We lucked out. Luck had nothing to do with it, said Luke. It was that dolphin. They stared at him. Dolphin, repeated Charla. You must have seen it, Clue insisted. It pushed us into the island. Just like you told us, Ian. Deans try to help people. This one saved our lives. You must have been hallucinating, Ian said kindly. There wasn't any dolphin. A big wind blew us here. Don't you remember? 1 minute we were drifting and the next we were being carried along by a hot wind. It felt sort of like the dryer in a wash car. You're both crazy, explained Charla. Nothing brought us here. We swam here. We lined up along the raft and kicked like crazy. When I close my eyes, I can still see us doing it. They stared at one another, bewildered as the rain beat down. Okay, so all of them, well, minus Ian because he's still unconscious, but the rest of them are like trying to think of, they all have a different version of how they got to this island. No one remembers the same thing, so they were all, who knows how they really got there? Do I know? No, we don't know. Ian seemed to choose his words very carefully. I think maybe we're all right inside our minds. By that time, the rubber hat was full again. Charla drank some more and passed it around. Luke raised it like a champagne glass. To us men! I can't believe he made it. His face fell suddenly, and to those who didn't make it. It was a painful thought, one that packed the wallop of a sledgehammer. But the castaways had more pressure problems, the need for food, the need for shelter, the need to help their unconscious friend. So they set aside their grieving and made plans to explore the island that had risen from the sea to save their lives. The end. Snap. Fun fact, I don't know if I told you guys, but this is a series. So next week on Monday, we will start book 2 to find out what the heck is going to happen next. But right now, 4 of them are on the island. 3
How
of
many
them
series are there?
One of them's unconscious. What?
How many series are there?
3 books total.
Yes.
So on Monday, we will start the next book. So thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you for being on with me. I hope you guys have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Take the AR quiz if you've listened to all the story. Feel free to email me over Thanksgiving if you guys need anything. I'll be checking my email periodically. So if you need anything, let me know. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you guys later, okay?
Bye, Miss Kneifel. Have a good weekend.
Safe, guys. See you later.
Bye. Enjoy your Thanksgiving break.
You too. See you later.
Okay.
Bye.